It's the worst of the CBC for March 3rd, 2020, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. All right. So, worst coverage. I mean, again, the CBC is still the same. So the worst covered story, we'll get into sort of how they're doing Super Tuesday. There's a bit of funny things around that. We'll give analysis. But we're going to go to the biggest omission first, because this is actually a really, really important story, and it's getting no coverage in the press, and it'll be sort of up to me to bring it to the public attention. But Turkey is going down the rabbit hole of supervillain. Erdogan is going closer and closer to supervillain. So you have probably heard about the new migrant crisis from in Greece, basically where Turkey released thousands of migrants and political prisoners and other type of prisoners into Europe. Now this needs a bit more of a complex background and what's going on here. So this is essentially what Castro did when he first got into power. So he released a bunch of prisoners and said, go to America. So to unburden his prison system and to sort of flood the American with criminals. So sort of, just another means of warfare. Erdogan is now doing this to Europe. So there's a lot to sort of say here. Now, context. Erdogan in Turkey is currently fighting Syria and somewhat Iran in Syria, and the Kurds too. They're the Islamist backing. So where Syria would have been more secular, Erdogan is openly trying to establish a caliphate, right? This is what ISIS wants to do, global caliphate. Erdogan wants to be global caliph. He is Muslim Brotherhood. He is Islamist. He's the man famous for, well, not famous, but he's the man who said there is no such thing as moderate Islam. There is no moderate Islam. It's Islam or not Islam. Those are the two choices. So this is Erdogan. Now, there are many different reasons why he might do this. He might say, you know what? This is just part of the caliphate thing. We're just going to flood Europe with migrants, break it economically, increase the amount of Islamists in Europe, have them, take down the West for me. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation is, he just wants to deburden himself of all the immigrants and save money on prisoners by just throwing them into Europe. Then there is the possibility that he is doing this as a terms of political leverage. He's saying, hey, look, I have a weapon here, which is sort of control of all mass migration into Europe because we're on the border. Either you back my military exploits in Syria and then I'll withdraw this. I'll tone down the immigration. So it's sort of used as a political weapon to gain leverage over the Europeans. That is another possibility. Then there's the other possibility that, this is sort of ties in, that he is, again, looking to maintain support from NATO. And here's a reason why he would want it. So there's a lot to be said about what's happening in Turkey. And Syria, Turkey. Is a lot of Obama's reasoning for not going into Syria is, Syria had an air force and it would be unequal. And, Turkey's kind of kiboshed all that. Just they've been a superior military, has defeated an inferior military, and Turkey's sort of taken control of where they want to take control. So it was quite easy to push back the Syrian Air Force. It took them no time. The problem for Turkey is potentially Russia. So here's where you have the sort of the liberal heart, the real liberal heart, the sort of anti-evil, anti-Islamist, anti-communist, anti-dictator part. Say, you know what? It actually isn't that bad. Because if Russia gets involved in this fight, Turkey won't be able to beat Russia. Then you have the Russians and the Turks bogged down in a war with Syria and Iran, another one of the Western enemies caught in the crossfire. This is great. It's all our enemies fighting together. There is a problem, though. So you say, okay, let's kick Turkey out of NATO. Does Turkey then join Russia? Because Russia doesn't really care and Turkey doesn't really care. So this is sort of the problem that the West is facing is how do we distance ourselves enough from Turkey to make them fight the Russians? But if we do it fully, and they just join the Russians, make a deal with them, well, then we have a very big problem on our hands. So this is sort of the political dance going on at the highest levels is how do we not back Turkey while still kind of backing Turkey enough that they can't leave us and join Russia, but we also want to bait the Russians into actually picking a fight with Turkey and have the Russians know that we won't come and back up Turkey, which we shouldn't. We shouldn't back Turkey if the Russians and Turks get into it. We should just let them essentially duke themselves out. So this is the most important sort of geopolitical story in the world, and it's getting very little coverage because, again, it has to talk about things like caliphates, why radical Islam, the use of immigration as a weapon. So the media will never cover this, or will never 95% of the story the media will not cover. They'll cover the fact that migrants want to get into Europe and all that, but they will not cover any of the causative effect here. So that's why I started the biggest omission. Now, the worst covered story is Super Tuesday, just because they covered a polling person who says the Democrats are going to win, and she correctly predicted 2018, unlike so many other pundits. Well, like, everyone kind of predicted 2018. Everyone predicted the Democrats would win the House, right? Everyone was predicting a blue wave, and it wasn't as big as it was initially projected, but they were saying this woman had projected it, and she's projecting the Democrats to win at least 270 seats and delegates, and she got the thing. But it was just sort of portrayed as like, yeah, they're not listening to her because she's a woman, and the online statistical projections of politics is a man's game. Really? Really? Is it? How many people are saying, yo, bitches can't predict elections with math? That's be crazy. Like, does this culture exist that no one's aware of? And I know math nerds, okay? You know what? We can do a show. Instead of hockey pictures, there'll be math awards in the background, okay? I know math people, all right? Math people would be thrilled for more women in their field. Do you know how rarely these people have contacted the outside world? And they want to procreate, or at least, try to. So going on after nerds for being a boys club, I find that comical, knowing a lot of math-inclined folks, let's just say. So it was just of course it was biased, and of course this, but they made this like projections lady into some sort of feminist hero who was, doing math even though the men said she couldn't. Oh boy. And so we'll cover Super Tuesday on the show tomorrow and on Thursday. So that is the worst of the CBC today, because it didn't have Wet'suwet'en propaganda, and it was just some nonsense coronavirus. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 on the Rosemary Barton scale. It's 7 out of 10, just because I didn't want to end my life while watching it. It was bad, but not suicidally bad, which is that the new standard at the CBC? I guess so. So that was it, and I'll see everyone tomorrow.